All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time and joining us for our next guest expert speaker. We have Rich Schefren here with us. Did I say your last name correctly?
Schefren, good enough.
Schefren.
I don't.
Yeah,
All
it's all
good.
good. It's all
Yeah.
good. So Rich is joining us here today. We are able to ask this man about anything that's going on in the online world. Now, Rich and I have done an interview before on his Steal Our Winners subscription show. We are definitely going to give you some access to how to get into his community, how to be a part of his world a little bit later. So make sure that you stay on and keep with us. But today we have just some questions we're going to ask Rich. What I ask you to do is make sure that you put your questions in the chat if anything comes up, because we're going to kind of keep this open. This is going to be more interview style. So that means that you guys can raise your hand. We'll bring you up. Rich is a guru for the gurus. Like, he's the guy that trains the guys that train the guy. Okay. So it's really amazing to have him here. He has been in the online world for ever, it seems like, and he has a lot of things that he's seen that have worked really, really super well. And he always are interviewing new people on Steal Our Winners that allows us to have the most up-to-date information. So I'm going to guide our conversation. My name is Marie Mack. If you are brand new here, thank you so much for joining us. It's amazing to have you in the TFM community. Justin, who is my co-host, is typically here, but he is deep down into some amazing projects for you guys. And Trevor is here with me to support you along the way. We also have Chad, who is usually in the chat. James is usually in the chat. So as things are coming up, pop them into the chat. The team will help me make sure you get your questions answered. And we're just going to kick it off from the top, okay? So Rich, anything else you want to say? Just say hello, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then I'll ask you kind of some questions.
Yeah. I'd love to, maybe even before we get into the questions, kind of
Sure.
talk about something like why I created Steal Our Winners, but not why I created Steal Our Winners, because I don't know that anyone's interested in it, but like what motivated me to, and based on what I've learned over the years, and why I think like looking at marketing maybe a little bit different than the way people currently look at it might be very beneficial for them. So just to kind of give everyone like a quick overview of me, I first took over, like, I want to give you a little bit of my business experience because I think it'll be relevant as it relates to where I want to take it. And that is that, so I started offline, and I started with a clothing store that became like the popular clothing store in New York City. Had like all the celebrities and famous people shopping there. And I learned in that world, image and style type advertising, very different than the type that we do online, very different than direct response. And that success in that venue then took me into the music business, and it was more of the same as far as creating like a specific kind of image and projecting that out to the world. And then I semi-retired kind of in my mid-20s, not like I was never going to work again, but made enough to take a bunch of time off, and wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. And I went and got hypnotized, and because I read an article in Time Out magazine about a hypnotist, and I thought it would be kind of cool to experience that. And turns out I'm highly hypnotizable. So I had a profound experience and wanted to learn more. So I started studying hypnosis, and then I decided I wanted that to be my next business. So I opened up a hypnosis center, and I started advertising the way I knew advertising, which was more image and style and slick and cool. And the more I liked the ad, the worse the ad did. And then I learned about this thing called copywriting and direct response. And the more unappealing, the more embarrassing the ad looked, the better it did. The more it looked like I belonged in the National Enquirer, the better the ad did. And that really took me down a path of learning direct response. And that's what put me in touch with a lot of the legends of direct response, like people like Gary Halpert and Jay Abraham and Dan Kennedy. And I worked with all of them back then. Then our hypnosis business grew a lot. And when I decided to get out of the hypnosis business, I got online primarily because like I had fallen in love with direct response. And in each of the businesses that I was in, the fashion business, music business, the hypnosis business, once I kind of figured out the marketing of it, like there really was nothing to hold me back. And when I got online, at first I really struggled because I was trying to do everything myself. And because like the end of the hypnosis business, we were trending towards 13 million in our 4th year. And then 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, we were dependent on our newspaper advertising, and it just kind of crushed the company. And so there were a lot of like, you know, when you have a merchant account, you're personally liable. And we had sold about like $6 million worth of annual programs. And so if I close the hypnosis center before people finish their annual program, then I am on the hook for it. So I was on the hook for 6 million. So I had to just kind of service everyone before I closed the business. And so for a year, I was making payroll, you know, just like every 2 weeks, I'd watch my bank account go back almost to zero, and then I'd be working my butt off just to make it back, right? So by the time I got online, I was anti-employee because I didn't want to go through that again, but I really struggled because I was trying to do everything myself. And then I kind of finally figured out that no, in a lot of ways, online business is very similar to offline business. Online marketing might not be, but as far as the business goes, it is. And so then I started to do like ebooks, and I did very well, like we sold like 30 or 40 different ebooks in the parenting niche. And once I kind of figured that out, I started helping some friends because they didn't have the business experience I had. And I saw that I was getting really like being able to help them a significant amount. So then I decided to go into coaching because I wanted to try that. And I took a initial group of clients. My very first group was 25 people, and I grew their businesses significantly. And a lot of those people are people who you would recognize the names, people like Russell Brunson of ClickFunnels, or Ryan Dice, a digital marketer, or Mike Filsaime, or Ryan Levesque, or Todd Brown. Like these were all those clients. And but my own business was not growing like the way that I would like. So I was a coach. I was making about 30 grand a month as a business coach. And like, I was wishing to do more, but at that time, like nobody was really that interested in business coaching, believe it or not. I was the first online business coach. And and I couldn't really break out. And so like I had this project with Agora, I just finished. So it's June of 2006. And I had just finished my first coaching group. And I had this like 3-month window before I was going to take on a project from Agora. And I didn't like the idea of not making any money for 3 months and not having much to do. So I was hoping that there was some kind of way maybe I could take my year-long coaching program and condense it down into 11 weeks and write a report, possibly illustrating what the market was doing wrong and why I believed I had the answers, right, of what people should be doing. Now, I released it as a PDF, and there was a really good reason why I released it as a PDF. There was like numerous things happening at the same time. So I was on a Dan Kennedy coaching and consulting boot camp, and someone asked the question that had been like bothering me, and I didn't really have an answer. It's a stupid question now, but back then I didn't know better. And that is that I had this coaching program, but I didn't have any front end products. I didn't have any mid-tier products. All I had was a coaching program. And I wanted to create products so I could get customers so I could then get them into my coaching program. But I was afraid that I would cannibalize my coaching program by taking ideas out of my coaching program and putting them into my low price products. And so someone asked Dan that question, and Dan just laughed at them. And I remember his answer verbatim because it like seared into my brain. He was like, "Bubba, you don't get it. right? As he's chuckling, he's like, you take your best stuff and you put it into your low price stuff, because that's what's going to get people to want to join your coaching program, right? And so I thought, like, okay, well, if that's true, then if I just shared it with the world, maybe it would be even better, right? So that was part of the idea. And then another part of the idea was that John Reese, who had done like the first $1 million day launch, he told me, because we were friends, that when he was launching his newsletter, that he was surprised at the uptake on the PDF of like a sample newsletter, right? Because this was before people really gave away PDFs and stuff. This was when people, like, the bribe on your website wasn't a lead magnet as much as it was like a 7-day e-course and things like that. And so I decided to write a PDF where I took all my best ideas, put them in there in a way that would set up the sale. And I was hoping to get a dozen clients. And I got a lot more than that, right? So the name of that lead magnet, kind of like one of the first lead magnets online, was the Internet Business Manifesto, and that ended up going viral. And so within like 3 to 4 weeks, I had about 1,200 to 1,300 high ticket buyers, not a dozen. And my entire life changed. And for the next 18 months, all I did was write reports, because it was the one thing I was doing differently than everyone else. And that was making all the difference. And every report, like, I made millions of dollars on, and my business grew, right? And the following year, in 2007, John Benson shared with me the video sales letter. He invented the video sales letter in December of 2005. He had written for Mike Geary a promo using the VSL and had like smashing success with it. And so he shared it with me in 2007. I brought it to Agora in 2007. And at that time, Agora was a $150 million business. And, you know, one of the big behemoths of the industry at that time. They had the best copywriters, some of the best marketers, right? But they were doing 150 million. And then I brought them the VSL, right? And in that 1 year, Agora grew by over $1 billion. We grew from 150 million to 1.2 billion. Because the VSL, the way it was done then, right, where we were just copy and pasting a sales letter into a PowerPoint and then adding audio, right? Boosted response here in the US 400%, boosted it in France 300%, boosted it in Germany 250%. And so there's a couple things about that I just want to illustrate, that even though Agora was the big behemoth, it took an outsider to bring some inside strategy that immediately kind of had them blow up. And and it wasn't even something that, you know, all I did was take it from John and give it to Agora, right? Like, what did I do? But that caused this $1 billion worth of growth that they rode for many years. And it wasn't until 2017 that style of VSL no longer boosted response at all, right? But like in 2007, once like the first one hit, they then went back to all the old sales letters and just changed them. And then all of a sudden, every sales letter was doing 400% more here in the US, right? It was pretty insane. The following year, I also in 2007 was the first to do live streams. And the first time we did a live stream, we had over 10,000 people show up. We didn't even advertise it. And when we opened cart for a few minutes at the end, we were making $700,000 a minute. And I remember like being in a fight with Jeff Walker because he wanted me to pull the plug after 1 minute. And I wanted to keep that open as long as humanly possible because I couldn't remember time before and since that I've made that kind of money. So at 5 minutes, we pulled the plug. But the reason why is that we had a big launch like a month and a half later, and scarcity travels. So if people feel boxed out of one, they were more likely to buy in the future. And that's why he wanted me to pull the plug while there was still that kind of flow, right? Having lots of people locked out. And we did, and people were still coming in, but like, who knows maybe if I would have left it open a couple more minutes, it would have been, I would have made that much more money. Then, but like, today, if I were to do a live stream, I'm not going to get 10,000 people just to show up because like, it's not new. Everybody does it, et cetera. The next year after, I noticed that in my business, I was making less with each report, primarily because the team had grown and grown and grown, and I was supporting more and more people. I told the guy that ran my business, I'm not writing any more reports. Like, I'm done. And I will write a report if this business goes out of business, and you and I will be fine. But I'm not just going to write reports to kind of keep this business afloat. And so we have to figure out a new model. And that's when we developed the automated webinar. And when we first started with automated webinars, the registration rates were insane. The show up rates were insane because there were no automated webinars. We were the only ones that had it, right? And then I shared it and taught it to Brunson and Kern and Todd Brown and Mike Filsain. And then we were the only people that had it. And everybody crushed it for numerous years. And until, probably like 2010, 11 is when courses started coming out on automated webinars and things like, and tools started coming out for it as well. And I could go into more stories like that, but by 2012, I kind of had a midlife crisis and made all the money that I ever thought I was plus, and thought I'd be happy, found out I wasn't. And so decided that I was just going to work with private clients like Agora and a few other big companies. And I was going to kind of just reduce my company to like a skeleton crew and just have everything that was automated be automated. And so that lasted for about 5 years. Got to spend a lot of time with my kids and everything and kind of figure out who I wanted to be when I grew up. And then decided to come back into the market. Now, when from 2004 to, let's say, 2012, Strategic Profits was primarily a company that had mostly back-end type products. We didn't have very many front-end products. It was mostly all strategy, systems, things like that. In 2017, when I decided to come back into the market, Agora was still a client of mine. They wanted to be in internet marketing as well. So we decided that they would buy half my business. So they bought half of Strategic Profits. And then I was involved in a bunch of stuff that with AI back then for Agora. So I didn't really have a chance for a few years to kind of focus in on the company, how we were going to start growing the company. And I could tell you long stories about that, but I don't think it's relevant for right now. But there is something that's important. So during my time off, I got really into like biohacking and fitness, right? Like I'm in better shape now than I was in my 40s, 30s, 20s, right? And I noticed that in some of the videos I would watch on YouTube and things like that, people would be wearing like t-shirts that said Gymshark on it. And I didn't know anything about this brand. I was kind of curious, like, what is this brand? And one day I came across a documentary about the beginnings of Gymshark. The first part was about the beginnings. The second part was like, I don't know, some expose. But I was watching it and I was more interested in the first part. And Gymshark is $1 billion brand, but they got their start because the founders, the two people that founded it, were really the first to kind of figure out that someone who has a following on social media has influence. And so they were in their garage making their clothes, and then they were sending it for free to people that had a big following on social media. And those people wore it because they weren't used to getting things for free. That wasn't like the way influencer marketing is today. And they just blew up. And I saw that. And then I started thinking about some of the experiences that I just shared with you, that like, that's interesting. Like the first people that kind of jumped on that trend, like had their business like multiply like significantly. And then I started thinking about myself, and it's like, when I did the reports, my business multiplied significantly. When I did the live streams, my business jumped again significantly. When I did the automated webinars, again significantly. When I brought to Agora the VSL, it jumped significantly. And I was like, all right, well, so I'm seeing a pattern here, right, of both stuff that's happened for me, stuff that's happened for some of my clients, and stuff that now I'm seeing out in the world. And I'm like, let me confirm this and actually call some friends to see if this pattern is the pattern, right? And so I called Perry Marshall, who's a close friend of mine. And I said, Perry, like, I'm seeing that, like, when I look at like the successes that I've had, the successes I've helped my clients have, the overwhelming majority of it comes from kind of getting on a marketing strategy or tactic early on in its life cycle and mastering it, and therefore having this competitive advantage in the marketplace. And I'm like, is that been your experience? And Perry's like, thought about it for a second. And he was like, yeah, that certainly would be my experience. That, back in the days when I was teaching Google AdWords and I was really the first person teaching it, the companies that like learned it first and had this big advantage over their competitors really were able to outspace them. And then what the business owner did kind of determined what would be next, whether they just ended up taking a lot of cash off the table and putting it in their pocket, or left the money in the business and then it exploited new and other advantages and was able to really scale upwards. And I was like, cool, okay, so that's like a confirmation. And then I called Ryan Dice and I asked him, and Ryan was like, thought about it also, and he's like, yeah, he's like, if someone doesn't have an advantage in a small business, how the hell would they grow anyway? They need something like that unless they're VC funded, right? And so I created this product called Steal Our Winners, primarily because I don't think most people understand this, right? So like I had a webinar yesterday that was a pitch webinar, and I'm not here to pitch you, but I want to show you a couple of the slides from that because I think they're highly relevant to this idea that if you got this and nothing else, and I'm sure Marie's going to make sure you get a lot more than just this, but if you just got this and it really altered the way that you look at marketing, I think it will do you a tremendous service. And if you don't get this from me, I feel like I'd be doing you a disservice. So
we're going to make sure that you have are you going to share screen, Rich?
I'm going to share screen. Yeah.
Okay. So Trevor will make you co-host. And as you're getting this up, I'm just going to connect this for everybody. Obviously, okay. We're hearing Rich's story. He has been in this industry for a long time. We had a ton of people in the chat, Rich, are like, they're online because of you. So thank you, because we created all kinds of brand new, amazing business owners here. And all of this is coming together because the knowledge that Rich has had over the course of the last decade is absolutely fantastic. And I know that we're going to start to share a little bit. We had a couple questions to Rich just about some of the other, we've listed them out here, but I want to make sure you share this because this is what is working now, right? Like this is what is happening. Yeah.
It's more like, we'll get to what's working now, but it's more about understanding why that's so important first, right?
Got it.
So like, I did this new webinar yesterday. It was a pitch webinar. So like I said, and
you should be able to share screen now whenever you're ready.
Right.
Okay,
so,
cool.
Right. And so I'm taking out, I just want to select a few slides here to kind of illustrate a couple points, right? But I started this webinar with this question. Have you ever had a marketing strategy or tactic blow you away? In other words, like you were expecting X, but you ended up getting 10X, or you were expecting, where what happened was far more than what you ever thought would happen, or even you hoped would happen. And the reason I think that's a really valuable question to ask, and it's a question to ask yourself, is that pretty much everyone who I spend time with could answer that question, yes. Right? And if you don't have anything like that, that's a good indicator as to where maybe you're not necessarily using the right strategies and tactics. Because if you've never had one that fully blew you away, right? Like what that implies to me is that you're probably using many outdated tactics, which is fine for most things, but you need at least one or two things. Like for me, there was always one thing, like the reports were, everything else in my business was exactly the same, but the one thing I was doing different from everyone else was reports, right? Then the one thing I was doing different was live streams. Then the one thing I was doing different was automated webinars, right? And each of those things did blow me away when we first did them, like significantly, right? And so and I give a bunch of examples of like from my story, which we don't need to do here. But what I want to show you is that is this diagram that I created to really kind of just show what's going on here, right? And this is the basis of why I have Steal Our Winners, but I'm not sharing it with you because like I'm trying to indoctrinate you into a line of thinking, because then you'll be really easy to sell Steal Our Winners. Although maybe they're like, that might happen, right? I'm sharing it with you because like I could have done anything online when I came back, and I chose Steal Our Winners. And the reason I chose it is because of this, because I believe in it with every fiber of my being. And even when I asked other people, they confirmed it for me. So my experience dictates this, as well as lots of other people's experience. And that is this diagram that expands out. So every marketing strategy, tactic, platform, over time, the results plummet, right? There was a time when you could get on Instagram and you didn't have to be that great and you could blow up on Instagram. That's never going to happen again. Like the odds of that happening are slim to none. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be on Instagram. You should be on Instagram, right? They're like, just like I still use free reports today, but I do not expect a free report today to do anything comparable to what it did back in 2006, right? So there are things that are needed to be done in your business that just need to be done because like that's the vehicle, but you shouldn't expect it to do anything magical if it's something that's been around for a long time, because results over time degrade. And if that wasn't bad enough, and that is bad, right? The effort to get the result increases over time. So, and when I say effort, that's like, I mean more than just effort. I mean skill set. I mean resources. I mean lots of different things, right? So for example, like with VSLs, for example, right? The way that VSLs were done like in 2007 to 2017 at Agora was basically copying and pasting a sales letter and just putting it on a white PowerPoint. That's not the way VSLs are done today, right? So in order to get a result from VSLs today, you have to do a lot more than that. And like the best results right now that are being generated from VSLs are something called the DocuPitch VSL that was created by Peter Kell, where the whole VSL is really a documentary, but it still ends with a pitch, but it's such good quality that they advertise it on YouTube. They don't take people off YouTube to watch the VSL. The VSL is on YouTube, but it's 35 or 40 minutes, looks like a documentary until the ending. And that's a much bigger budget, much bigger work, right? But like Mindvalley spent over $2 million just on that video alone. They have over 38 million views of that VSL, right? Because that's where VSLs are today. And so if you were to maybe incorporate that type of VSL, you'd be back at the beginning of the curve, but it's a lot more effort. It's a lot more work, right? So you'd be the yellow line, you'd be towards the beginning, but it's still on the blue line, it's a lot of effort, right? So you have these two diagrams, right? And that kind of paint a picture of where the sweet spot is for finding certain marketing tactics for yourself. Now, what I try and do in Steal Our Winners is kind of have the left-hand triangle that's kind of created. That's where I try and find stuff for Steal Our Winners, where the results are still much higher than what the effort is that goes in, right? But if you look at, so this is kind of like how it progresses, right? So first an insider discovers it, figures it out, invents it, right? Shares it with other insiders. Eventually it makes its way to like high-end masterminds. Eventually it makes its way to courses. There's generally like, for me, for John Benson with the VSL, for the automated webinars, there's generally like a 5-year period before it goes from like being discovered and used to actually being in a course, right? And it still works in a course, but it doesn't work as well as it once did, right? When it was easiest. And then it goes to forums and groups, and then eventually goes to where everybody knows. There's no leverage in what everybody knows. And, when I was writing all the reports, the first 3 I wrote were manifestos, but then the next 2 were called doctrines. And the first one was the Attention Age Doctrine in 2007, and then the Attention Age Doctrine 2 in 2007. And those were all about how attention was going to become the scarcest commodity online and what the implications were for entrepreneurs. That was one. And then where I thought people's attention was going to go online, and that was number 2, and that was social media and Web 2.0. And when you, one of the reasons the VSL works is because it grabbed an additional amount of attention in the very beginning, because it was something that people hadn't seen before. And it was like, what's that? Right. And just that added couple of seconds of attention could make a world of difference. But when you're using something that everybody knows, it's the opposite, right? People have seen it before. They're much more likely to reject it up front. And so there's a huge difference, right? And obviously this is very self-serving what I'm showing you here, but I'm telling you that I believe it to be true. And I've tried to check my biases by asking enough people. There's a huge difference between a strategy that worked versus a strategy that's working right now, right? And what I see when I look at a lot of people's businesses who are struggling is that everything that they're doing could be put in the everybody knows category. And then they're wondering why they're not getting the results that they see other people get. So it's it's not uncommon at all for me to talk to entrepreneurs. I was in this spot myself, and I can tell you at least half the gurus that I've coached were in this space early on in their careers too, where they thought there was something wrong with them because they were doing all the things that everyone else was doing, and yet they weren't getting any results, right? But the thing is that doing everything that someone else was doing, but doing it now, and maybe they've been doing it a long time, doesn't get you the same ramp up that they got, right? And so I find that and this has just been my work with a lot of people, right? Is that one, on a business side, everything that they're doing in a marketing situation is something that is past tense. And that's okay, but they still need something that drives it forward, that does give them advantage over all their competitors. And that if they've been struggling for a long time, then oftentimes they start blaming themselves, right? Thinking that there might be something wrong with them. And it unfortunately also can magnify out into procrastination, self-doubt, all these things, because it's an unpleasant grind. And a lot of those problems disappear when you have something exciting in your business. It's hard to get to work when you doing it, and you just get disappointed or frustrated over and over again. Going to work is very different when something is working and there's something to look forward to check sales, check stats, and stuff like that. And oftentimes a lot of the personal issues disappear when the business is more exciting. And so my point in telling you all that is 2 things, really. One, if everything that you're currently doing is if you have nothing on the cutting edge, it could be the reason. I'm not going to say it is the reason, but it could be the reason why your business is not doing as well as you'd like. And if you think it's you, odds are it's not, that's a common thought. And that a lot of the problems get resolved that you think are you when you address the first part, which is having something in your business that actually makes you stand apart. And, this is the last thing, then I'll hand it off to you, Marie, and then you can take me wherever you want to take me. Gary Vaynerchuk and I used to be really close, over a decade ago, and he used to speak at all my events. And I remember at one of my events, he was talking about the potential of the internet, how big it is, right? 6 billion people all interconnected throughout the world, right? And I've always been kind of amazed by that too, because even when I did the manifesto, it was within a week, it was in 32 different countries, and it was all over the world. And like before the internet, that could have never happened. Maybe like 5 companies in the world could pull something like that off. And here I was just by myself working and doing it. But so the internet has tremendous potential for anyone because of the size and scope and the interconnectivity. But you're also competing against more businesses than any business has ever competed against as well, right? So you have tremendous upside, but you also have tremendous competition. And one of the things Gary said was, look, I don't care if you live at home, hate your parents, live in the basement, only wear green socks, and hate all people, right? Like, the world is a big place, and there are other people who live at home, hate their parents, live in the basement, only wear green socks, and you could be the leader of those people, right? And there's certainly some truth to that, right? That the internet has taken what was once, we used to buy based on proximity, like who was closest to us, and nowadays we buy based on relevancy, who has what is most relevant to us. And so that's what gives each and every one of us the ability to potentially have a business, because we might be most relevant to some group of people more so than anyone else. But it is also highly competitive. And if you do the same things as everyone else, the ability to stand out is highly difficult, right? It is your uniqueness, what makes you unique, that actually is your biggest advantage if you're willing to embrace it. And that recognizing these component pieces, I think, is really critical. And that's why I just wanted to start with it, because like, I never realized when I started that how critical it was to have some advantage in your marketing, and that for most people, that like, it's not going to be the messaging, right? Because like, unless you happen to be gifted in that, or you are best friends with one of the best copywriters in the world, likelihood is you're not going to have some over-the-top advantage in your messaging. So then how are you going to be able to stand out? And I definitely think that that is what we do in Steal Our Winners is we try to provide like a continual stream of cutting edge things that are working. But you also have to think about who you are, what you bring to the table, and where you might be able to use what's unique about you to stand out, right? Like if I had to compete on, like, I wrote reports because I'm a deep thinker and I'm a voracious reader. If I had to do what like Frank Kern does on video, I would fail. I'm not as charismatic as he is. That's just like the reality, right? Like, and so if I had my heart set on being charismatic on video, and that was the only way that I was going to grow my business, or I took all these video courses, I'd be doing myself a disservice, because it's not who I am, right? And so I find that most people don't like really tap into who they are. And that is the biggest point of uniqueness that you have. And that's therefore part of your advantage. And so I know none of this has to do with what's working now specifically, but I've just seen over the years, so many people go the wrong way because they are trying to replicate someone else's success, or they're trying to be like someone else. And it totally blocks them in business from the opportunity that they truly have. And the opportunity that you have is to leverage what's unique about yourself into your business and into your marketing, so that you can have some advantage in marketing, and then translate that into the growth of your business. But anyway, so I don't want to just talk about that. So where do you want to take this?
That, I mean, first of all, everybody just needs to sit with that for a second. Like, maybe you're just here for me, but I know I needed to hear it in my business too, Rich, is that who I am and what I bring to the world in my business is massive. And each one of you are here with a business in hand, and your uniqueness is why you're here. That's what I'm pulling from all of this. And it's massive, right? The fact that you get up every single day and that everybody here is on this call and they're doing something good for their business means that you have a passion that's out there and you can put it together. Absolutely. It's all perfect. Thank you, Rich, for just sharing a little bit of your insight too. I have a couple questions, so I want to make sure we're using that as much of our time
Yeah,
as
definitely.
possible. But
And
go
one
ahead.
thing on that is just, I did do a presentation at Diamond Day, which was like a whatever kind of internet event, all about that, not about the marketing side, but just about who are you, your identity, and leveraging that to stand out. And we'll make sure to get you a link to that so that you
Yeah.
can just, if you want people to, like, if people are interested, they could watch it. It's just showing people how malleable your identity is, and how you're not like, you haven't been the same person all the time, and you will continue to change, and being aware of that, like, then can help you kind of figure out, like, who do you need to be for your market. So
Yeah,
we'll get that.
absolutely. I'll make sure to get to the team and put that in with the replay. Just as a reminder for everybody here, there is going to be a replay. Everybody who's listening, obviously, they're on the replay. I'll just make a suggestion to go back and just listen what Rich said right before this, is like, your business and who you are is important in the whole entire world. Like, this is a big deal, and don't try and be like other people are, if that makes sense. Like, be who you are. You being here is what your niche needs, and leaning into your own brilliance is why you're online and who you are. Don't try and be like everybody else, right? Like, it's the same for me. I'm not a video person. I'm not on any social media. I don't like it. What I love is creating communities like this and making sure we're hosting amazing people here. So that's what I do in my brilliance, even if I'm at the beach. So I absolutely love it. I think I'm going to kind of make sure I annotate. Somebody was asking, like, how do you distill your own uniqueness? Rich just said that he has a little bit of that training. I think that that's something that we'll tap into in that recording. So I'll kind of leave that there.
I'll just add a question or two that you can ask your, because like, I created this program with Jay Abraham. It was a follow-up actually to the Attention Age Doctrine too. It was called Maven, and it was all about that people are going to be looking for authorities. And so how do you kind of set yourself up as an authority? And that's what they use at Agora for the positioning of all their gurus, like, throughout the world. And so I've done a lot of projects where, like, I've helped teams kind of like nail the character of the guru that is that franchise. And the easiest places to kind of find that would be, one, asking your spouse, like, what things, and generally I would be interviewing the spouse without that person there. So, if I was talking to Marie's husband, I'd be like, what are the things that are so Marie, right? Like, what are those things, right? And if I could ask her friends that, like, when Marie's not around, what things would make everybody say, oh, that's so her, right? Because that gives you insight. And then the other thing is, like, what conversation, I'm an introvert. And so most of the time I'm not going around like talking to lots of people, but what conversations, if they were going on right here, right next to me, would I find it very hard not to butt into, right? Like, other people's conversations, I don't even know them, right? But like, if they were talking about marketing strategies or online and stuff like that, I'd be like starting to get a little like antsy, because I would just have to interject at some point because, like, of what that conversation is to me. So what are those to you? And then, yeah, I have a whole video about it that you could watch, but just some nuggets there that might be helpful.
That's very helpful. Those are things you can do right now. And I think your uniqueness, and if you're kind of still a little wobbly about where your path is going in your business, this might be a really good step to take today. If you can, have somebody interview a couple of your friends. I know that I've done a series before where I just email 2 or 3 of my friends and I ask them some questions and say, just send that back to me. See what, if I was going to plan a party, what kind of party would I plan? Like, this fun stuff that that people give back to you, and that to your how other people see you. Obviously, we see ourselves a little bit differently than other people see us, right? So I love that. Thank you for those quick tips. I think that's really useful. I knew, Suzanne, you're asking about, does this work for a brand as well? I believe that it would. I don't know if, Rich, you think about a brand.
It does, but like, what I would say is that just so that people are aware, one, we're moving into a direction where brands are trusted less. So if like you haven't seen that just in the like what's going on in the world, then I don't know where you're looking. And then in addition to that, it's always been easier to grow a personality than it has been to grow a brand. Now, there are benefits to having a brand. So like, the biggest companies in the world are generally brands, they're not personalities, right? Like, so I get it. But it's much easier to grow a personality than it is a brand, because it's very easy for a person to stand out. Each of us has unique quirks, et cetera, that can be expanded upon to like be the thing so that people understand who that person is. And so even at Agora, right? Like at the end of the day, we built a 1.8 billion, like at our height, we were doing $1.8 billion a year. And that was a company built on just lots of personalities, right? So, I have a call next week with a bigger company that's trying to hit the small business market, and they want to talk to me about being a spokesperson for them because of the same reason that it's easier to resonate with a personality than it is with a brand. And so just something to always think about. So yes, it applies, but like, if the people who are customers can feel like they have a personal relationship with someone in the company, that will make it even easier to grow the brand, because you can leverage the best of both worlds.
Yep. And I think a lot of us, and myself included, like I am the owner of my business. Like I'm the one who's having the sales calls. I'm the one who's out there doing the video marketing. I'm the one who's in front of people. So if they're resonating with me, they're also going to resonate with the other people that are around in my company. Even though I don't do a lot of the work that's in my business, I have a team to do that, but they're coming in because I've set a culture inside of that. So I love that. And people are going to resonate with, and that's good, right? We want to attract the right people. I don't attract people who can't handle that I talk with my hands and kids might come into the room sometimes. Like that's just not the kind of business owner that I want to work with. And they don't find me the kind of personality that they want to be. So it's perfect. So I love that. I think that helps, Suzanne. I want to go back because Charles Markel, I think I said your name correctly. You were asking about a bell curve, but Rich did pull up some slides there. So maybe just give me a thumbs up because I can see you. Did that answer your question, Charles? Okay, cool. Perfect. So the slides that you were showing, that's what Charles was asking. He said he saw you at traffic and conversions or traffic and funnels or traffic and some things.
Places, yeah.
Maybe somewhere in Nashville. So that's perfect. I'm glad we got to answer that. Another thing that I wanted to make sure, we had a couple questions about the specifics of CRMs and systems, and list building is sort of what we're talking about with marketing, but do you have a specific CRM that you typically suggest people use?
Well, what I would say is use whatever you feel is going to be easiest. I've heard lots of wonderful things about Kartra from a bunch of friends of mine that if they had to start all over again, that's what they would use. I use Infusionsoft, but I am not very technically proficient. I don't pretend to be. I've never sent it. We've been using Infusionsoft for over 20 years. I don't know how to send an email in Infusionsoft. I'm not necessarily suggesting that everyone should be like that, but like by the time that we moved to Infusionsoft, I was already doing well. And therefore, like, it's never going to be highest and best use of my time to be sending to, scheduling a broadcast or setting up an autoresponder. And therefore, like, I never took the time to learn it, nor do I feel any less than because I don't know it. And that's what I mean. Like, it would be unwise for me to be in any business that needed those kind of detail-oriented thinking, because that's not me, and I would always lose at anything like that. So I would say that. And then what I would also say is that, there's many different ways to build your list. And where I think a lot of people make a mistake, and it is that I think that, like, when I've built my list the most, generally it was always with some, free piece of content, but I was very meticulous about that first piece of content. that I've always felt that most people don't make enough time for greatness, that they are like, there are a few kind of touch points that matter more than any other touch points in forming a new relationship, whether that's with a person on your list or anywhere else. And, being a voracious reader, right? Like, I will buy a book, and if I start reading it and I end up finishing it and I think it's crap, I will never buy another book from that person again. Right. And then there have been books where, like, I've read and I was blown away by it, and then I buy every single book that person has ever written, because, like, I like the way this person thinks. Right. Like, and so I think a lot of people think that you can kind of get away with, like, oh, your lead magnet, who cares? Right. But if that's the first impression that a lot of people are going to have, that's incredibly important. And really what it needs to do more than anything else is set up your value. So one way I like to think about marketing is, well, there are two thoughts about marketing that I have that I think are useful for people to think about. So one is, because I've sold a lot of things over my life that my prospects didn't even know they wanted, right? Like, when I sold a theory of constraints course back in 2008. And no one knew in our market what theory of constraints was. And now it's a little bit more popular. And so one of the ways that I've always looked at marketing, and, a mentor of mine and I were talking one night about it and kind of developed it into an idea. If you sell something that you believe in, right? Not that you believe in it because you sell it, but you sell it because you believe in it, right? Then something has led you to believe in it, and odds are your prospects have not had those same experiences, so they haven't come to the same belief. And so one way of looking at marketing is, like, accelerating the process for them to come to the same conclusions that you did. Like, when I sold theory of constraints, I was convinced that theory of constraints is really powerful, and I knew if I taught it, I'd learn it even better, and that's why I wanted to teach it. But I was talking to a market that had no idea what it was. So I had to think about, what was it that convinced me that theory of constraints was powerful? Because if I can translate that to them, then they'll come to the same conclusion, right? Like, because I was selling it because I believe in it. What made me believe in it, and how can I kind of give them those experiences to lead them to believe it, right? So that's kind of one thought. And then what I've tried to do, like, another, like, global way of just looking at marketing in general, is marketing is helping your prospect value your product, right? If selling is trying to, like, push them to where they need to get to make a decision, what precedes that is helping them see the value in what it is you offer, right? And that's where you're connecting the dots for people, where every market is made up of a group of people that just share a conflict. That's what defines the market, right? It doesn't always have to be, like, a conflict can be a goal unattained or a problem unresolved, right? One of those things is happening in a person's life to be in a market. And then your job, right, is to show why what it is that you provide is the best path out of that conflict, right? They might not know about your solution, right, in their awareness curve. They might not even be aware of the problem that you solve, but they are aware of the conflict. That's why they're in the market in the first place, right? So my job, like, when I wrote the Internet Business Manifesto, was to write to people who wanted to succeed online that were not, right? That's the conflict, right? I teach business growth, but they don't know that that's why, like, they aren't walking around at that time thinking that it's a lack of business knowledge that is the problem, is the reason why they have that conflict. So I have to show them in my marketing, and that's what marketing is all about, why understanding more about business is actually the path out of the conflict, right? And so I think when you're coming to list building, right, in general, there's going to be a trade of something, your email address for this, right? And what this should be is material that helps people really value what it is you offer, right? Like that's the best type of content, because giving people a new perspective about their problem or a new way to solve their conflict is very valuable material, but it also sets up why you exist and why people need to buy from you. And if that content is effective, you're well on your way, right? So like, you know, it's one thing, like if I was selling PLR stuff, right? Since that got brought up earlier, one way of thinking about it is like, oh, like I should have free content that is PLR and just like give that away. But in my opinion, that would be wrong. Like instead, like the best free content would be content that relates to helping someone get out of whatever conflict there is. And there's not a conflict with PLR. So why do they want PLR? What are they thinking? Are they thinking that they're going to grow their business or like whatever? And I'm going to focus in on that and how PLR can be the best way. And then I'm going to have my free content be about that. So when they're done with my free content, they feel like they got value, but they also now are more likely to want to buy PLR stuff from me, right? Because now I've kind of set up this way of looking at things, right? As opposed to just giving them something that doesn't really advance the sale at all, right? I think that, you know, the specifics, right? I think that nowadays, if I were just starting out, my thought would be is that the best places where to organically build your list, the best platforms would be TikTok, because you can get a big following on TikTok faster than on any other platform, and YouTube. And I just think I have like, I think YouTube is the one place that you still can grow, like from the older places that have been existing for as long as them, where you still like great content can just kind of ride up. And I think that like, it's one of the places where you can bond with people the most. And you know, it's like when I first started, there were no destination sites like that. Like people went to Google, did a search, and then they went out, right? There were no places where people just hung out for many hours. And now these platforms exist, right? And so I would have a presence, especially on TikTok, especially on YouTube. Those would be the two places that I would try and draw from the most, because those two are two places where you can still kind of build the following and grow. I'd be on Instagram and Facebook as well. I'd just be taking stuff over, but I wouldn't really be focused as much on those, knowing that I'm fighting an uphill climb on those. And then I would try to, I'm just trying to think like as it relates to list building, there were so many things I used to do, but I don't know that I would do many of those things anymore because of how different the world is, right? Like, you know, before there were big social media sites, like everything on my blog was used to try and build my list and stuff like that. But like, that was when people went to blogs on a very continuous basis because there was no Instagram, Facebook, stuff like that. Now you're fighting against those people, right? To bring people to your site, where you're probably just better off being on those sites to use as the place where you're getting your leads from and everything else. And if you create things that are high value, that are like what I'm talking about, generally that's more shareable content than a strategy or tactic, right? Like when a lot of the reports I wrote were shared a lot, right? That's how I got to millions and millions of downloads. And they were shared because like I was giving people different perspectives about the problems that they were suffering from or the conflict they were suffering from. And they had friends that were also, and so they felt like they weren't sharing. This would be the last thing just to kind of connect the dots. People never like, so as someone who's benefited greatly from like viral content, right? But never really engineered any viral content, just had it happen, right? I recognize that like people didn't share my content because they loved me. That had nothing to do with me, right? They shared my content with their friends because they loved their friends. And I had a message. It happened to be a marketing message, but nonetheless, I had a message that they felt would be helpful to, that was helpful to them and would be helpful to their friends, right? Like, and my experience has been one of the most valuable pieces of content you can give someone is a definition of the problem based on the way you solve it, right? But just a redefinition of the problem, because people find that very valuable. Like if you've ever suffered with a problem for some period of time and you thought it was X, and then you met someone that got you to see the problem differently, that's exciting, because with a new way of looking at that problem also comes newfound hope in solving that problem, because it's different than the way you were thinking about it before, right? So like, even in my webinar that I showed you earlier, right? Part of me kind of getting people to see that they've never had a marketing strategy like far surpass their expectations, right? Is me starting to open up the door in their minds of what their real problem is, right? Like they didn't come on that webinar thinking that's a problem, right? And I'm now surfacing that as a symptom of what might be going on in their business, right? So I'm already starting to take them down a path of like what their real problem is in their business that they've never thought about before. And I happen to believe it's true. That's why I do it, right? But like that allows me so that if by the time they get to the end of the webinar, they're convinced that the reason they're struggling is they have nothing new in their business, I've made the sale already, right? Without ever having to sell them Steal Our Winners, because like Steal Our Winners is the only product that really addresses that. But that's kind of irrelevant to the first part of the conversation, which is if I can get people to buy into that part of the problem. And if I do get people to buy into that problem, they will leave that webinar feeling like, right, like they got an education that was insanely valuable to them. And that's what good content does. And that kind of content needs to be at the beginning of your funnel, where the list building should be occurring. So a roundabout answer to that. Hopefully that helps.
Absolutely
and
fantastic.
I can hear you. I'm just grabbing my coffee. Like I'm sure I did this when we were talking privately. Yeah.
Please grab your coffee. Take a second. Absolutely amazing. I love, we have a lot of great phrases in the chat here for you too, Rich, is just all of the knowledge that we're taking in. And before, we're right at the top of the hour, so I'm going to do this real quick in the chat. And I know that Trev will send us a couple more times, but I'm just going to put the link for you guys to be sure to grab a book that Jay Abram and Rich have written. It looks like the 7 working strategies to supercharge your business profits. So
yeah,
this
those
is
are
a way
just
for
7
you to,
strategies from Steal Our Winners. Yeah.
Which is fantastic, because all of this it's going to highlight some of the things Rich was talking about today. It also allows you to get into Rich's world a little bit more and just learn, because obviously the stuff we're getting here are just little nuggets that are a bigger part of Steal Our Winners too. The other thing that I kind of want to connect is somebody was asking about email marketing. Is email marketing a thing? And Rich, you were talking about getting on all these social media and to being on YouTube and being on TikTok. Like that's where you're getting your leads in, but you have to put those people somewhere. So email marketing is where you put those leads. That's where you continue to invite them into your world. That's where you guys got this invite here, right? You are on an email list for Tools for Motivation because you said yes to us, and we now can have this free content for you. So just know that your email marketing is the same. It's a housing place for the leads that are coming in. I hope that makes sense.
How we monetize at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right. Like
You
even
have
at Agora,
to live that.
Yeah, even at Agora, right? Like the only thing we ever advertised in it was because the only thing we ever advertised were our front ends. And the reason why is that our back ends are even more aggressive than our front ends. And so we would never even be allowed on any platform to advertise our back ends. So like when you think about a $1.8 billion business, right? All of the money came from email in some way, shape, or form, right? Like we acquire by ads, but then we sell our back ends and we monetize that relationship completely through email. So yeah, it's still insanely important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to go, I know that in the chat we had some of this, but I'll say it aloud too. Chad was connecting the fact that Infusionsoft is now called Keep.
Yes.
They changed their name, but Infusionsoft, especially for the people that have been there for 10, 15 years, it is so cheap to stay. It's almost dumb to leave. But at the same time, if you are new to starting out, Rich said Kartra is a great place to go. So I'm sorry, I can't remember who was asking. Maybe Tina was asking about a CRM, what to do. I think the biggest thing, and maybe chime in here on the chat if somebody thinks, maybe Chad, you might have an idea about this, but it's just about using something that you're comfortable with and that you can get into and can send emails. Rich doesn't send his own emails now. However, back in the day he was, and he did know how to send out a lead magnet. He knew how to send out an email. So just make sure that you're using, whether it's Groove or Kartra or whatever you're in, that you're comfortable with that platform and that you're using it consistently to house those emails. I know we have some trainings about that too. So take a look at the YouTube channel, because we have a lot of past trainings on, you know, some of the things that we suggest for TFM, and that might be really big. I know we're kind of coming towards a little bit after 2 p.m. Eastern time. I don't know, Rich, what your timeline looks like.
2:30, so I'm good.
Okay, peaceful. So we're going to stay on. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to stay on a little bit longer. I do have a question here, and I see some hands raised, which is great. But Katie had a question. Rich, if you can tell us a little bit about your opinion on online courses. Is it too much infrastructure to create? Too much time consumption? What do you think about creating online courses?
I think, you know, I think that I think there's still opportunity there. I don't know how long the opportunity will last. What I will also say, though, is that I think people waste way too much time trying to get things right, making things like, I don't like, so what I'm afraid of is that if I say like, yeah, I think online courses are great, that then you think, or someone hears me say that and then thinks that they need to like get a Learn account or a Thinkific account or a Kajabi account or this, and then it becomes a learning curve, and now they're doing all this stuff. Like, you could have a course where you just basically have no platform and you load videos up into YouTube and you make them private so no one can find them, and then each day you send out a link to a different like video, and that could be the start. You know, I think that if you're trying to grow an online business, you're an entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur, your goal is to get feedback as early as possible, right? Like, and the way I did it, right, because I also had a philosophy that most entrepreneurs make the mistake of building a business around some mythical version of themselves, like some person that is not who they really are today. And I've never had that illusion. I tend to procrastinate and I tend to be a perfectionist. And if you locked me in a hotel room and told me I couldn't get out until a course was done, I think I would die in that hotel room. It would never be done. But if I pre-sold the course and I had to show up and deliver the course, like, then I wouldn't miss a day. And that's how, so all, like, when I was writing reports, we sold programs that didn't exist, and then I had to fulfill. And that was a way that I could design a business where the person who was in charge of content creation was a procrastinator and yet could still thrive, right? So I was very clear about kind of designing around my flaws. But the other thing is, right, that people spend too much time trying to get things right before they've ever been proven that it's even the right thing to be focused on. So like, if you were to sell a course, right, you don't need to, one, have the whole course done. You just need the first couple of pieces, and then you go out and you try and sell it. And if it sells, fantastic, then you're going to be busy, right? Like trying to get everything else done. But the mistake would be to think that you got to learn this new platform, get everything recorded really nice, loaded it all up, and then and only then do you start looking at the marketing of it. And then you find out that it's hard to sell it, right? So I think that things can be done in a duct tape, ghetto style, like down and dirty way until it's proven out. And that's how entrepreneurs generally operate. They make a mess behind them that they clean up when something strikes and works well, right? Like, and then they'll hire what's needed to be hired based on the money coming in to fix and address the issue. But like, they don't start with everything, doing things the right way and everything like I's dotted, T's crossed, because that takes a lot of time and it robs you of the experience of interacting with the market. And the more that you can interact with the market, the faster you'll get better, and the shorter time it takes to really get good. And so, yes, I think courses are still viable. I think that if it makes sense in your business, then it makes sense. But if you don't have any yet in your business, I would first create like just the welcome, maybe the module 1, that's it. And then I would try and go out and sell it. And based on the sales, I would then determine whether or not this is something I have to quickly finish, or maybe I had the wrong idea right from the get-go.
I love all of that. And I think that done is better than perfect, right? And I think that a lot of us are perfectionists and we just want it to be exactly the way it is. Remember that in TFM, especially if you're members, you have access to slide decks, you have access to video content, you have access to a lot of this already, which means your course can be put together super fast. So what Rich is talking about is going out there and selling the thing and then putting your spin on it and putting it out there in the world, not making it perfect. So I think that that's really important. And we had a couple people in chat just saying, you know, the validation is critical. It's great to just have it out there, like all the good things. So I appreciate that, hearing it aloud too.
Like I have a webinar later this evening where we're selling a coaching program, and we really shouldn't be doing a webinar this evening. We're not ready, but like I purposely did it early, knowing that my co-creator, like, we're going to struggle. It's not going to be that great. We only sent it to a small portion of our list because of that. Like, this was thought out in advance, but I wanted the pressure to get something done, that knowing that that's going to be the worst it ever is, but at least it will be done. And then we can work and make it better from there. So, you know, we're only like carved out 1,000 people on our list, which is a very small fraction of the number of people on our list. We hope that like we get 50 people on the webinar, as opposed to 500 or 1,000, and we'll work it out, you know. And just for anyone that struggles with perfectionism, I read this quote a long time ago and it hit me like dead center in my chest when I read it, and it's always stuck with me. It's something just to think about. Like, perfectionism is trying to get the world to believe something about yourself that you don't believe about yourself. Right? Perfectionism is about trying to get the world to believe something about yourself that you don't believe about yourself. And when I read that, I felt like it was pretty accurate based on what I was struggling with, right? So
that's huge. Yeah, absolutely. A quick shout out to Charles. Thank you, Charles. You've been putting these nuggets in the chat. You're just amazing. Thank you for doing that. It's helpful to just pick out little pieces, and I just really appreciate you a lot. If you guys have not yet saved the chat, please be sure to do that. We will have the replay together. I have one more question for you, but I'm going to pop the link in the chat to Rich's free gift. If you guys have not grabbed that yet, please do. That's the perks of having Rich here and having some more content. And then Rich, I'll make sure to reach out to the team and get that link so we can put everything with the replay as well. So we're going to take one more question and then we're just going to wrap this up so that we can get on with our day. Santo, you have your hand raised. I hope I said your name correctly.
It's all right. It's Santu, but it's all right.
Santu, wonderful. No, it's okay. Go ahead.
So for Rich, I wanted to ask, so if we take the PLR, the wonderful PLR that we get from Tools for Motivation, and turn it into a book, for example, and we want to sell it ebook, and we want to sell it on Etsy or Amazon or other platforms that don't collect emails, how would you suggest a workaround for that to be able to get them onto our email list?
Yeah, I would look at like all the best practices for stuff out there that like in books that do it. So one is like, could you have, you know, anything related to the PLR content? Can you strip that out and make it so that they have to opt in to get those pieces? If it's like, you know, something like related to steps or blueprint or something like that, right? If it's all self-help, right? Could you record a bunch of affirmations that are related to the content and they can download like a 1 page of the affirmations? Is there like an audio that you can create related to the content? And like, I would have numerous opportunities for someone in the book, in the PLR content, to actually like get from you something that would be immensely desirable related to like if they had gotten to that part of the book already, right? And so that would be one thing. And also, like, I'm not against PLR at all, but I think if you're going to do that, you would be well served to put something at the front of whatever it is that really like tells your own story or gives you the chance to at least start to form a, like, because they're like, when I say that YouTube is a great channel to bond with your, like your subscribers on YouTube, right? There are tons of channels that have no relationship with their subscribers, right? Like if you look at a lot of the like type of channels where there's really no face behind it, it's all just like, you know, it's all just like computerized talk or around different popular topics. Those channels have no bonding with their list, right? So you can use PLR. I think there's tons of great PLR stuff, but what PLR won't do for you is help you create a relationship with the person on the other end. And only you can be the person that does that. So what you need to do is kind of put something towards the front, right? That kind of,
yeah, like a welcome page that kind of just briefly tells who you are with a picture of yourself. Yeah, I've got the concept of the welcome page. And I was only
right.
saying,
And then, but then, right, like in even that welcome page, right, like then whatever the PLR content is, it's kind of like, and you know, you get this, but there's so much more than just this. And I want to send you X, and I want to send you Y, and I want to send you Z, all free, because I have found that these things make the difference with this content. And so like you're consistently trying to help them by getting them on your list so that you can send them these free tools, these free things that help actually get them on your list, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that. So I hope that helps. Obviously you have content that's created. It's a great starting point, but remember, we always suggest that you update it, you know, put it in your own voice. I know James has a replay about tweaking it to your ideal client, even creating an avatar using ChatGPT. So I'm going to put a link in the chat real quick, just back over to our, not only Rich's book, but also to our YouTube channel, because that replay of James's whole entire, he went through every single step, how to create an avatar on ChatGPT to update some of the content that is you're getting from PLR. So just remember that we're a starting point, and we help you get ideas. We help you put all the social media images together. Like all of that is a part of your tools for motivation PLR, but it's not necessarily their final product, right? Like put your own spin on it. And so it's a great starting point for it. As a reminder, we are going to send out the replay. We'll have that to you guys by the weekend. Those replays are all inside of our YouTube channel, so you can follow us there. Please do, because the more you follow us, the more we get followers and we can do ads and all the fun stuff, which is great. Rich, we are coming kind of to the end here. We appreciate you so much. I think we picked everybody's questions here. Lots of great insights, and so many amazing people that are online because they've heard you speak over the course of the last couple of, we'll say, almost decades. And I'm very thankful to have you here. Any other questions that you guys might have, stay on for just a couple more minutes. We're going to stop the recording and do our quick little after party, and then we'll close down in about 10 minutes. Hey, stick around if you'd like to do that. We'll close down the recording there, Trev.